And I would like to welcome you to this webinar of the series ENBIS Meets Editor. Galit Shmueli have accepted to give a webinar entitled Introducing the Informed Journal on Data Science. The title of the talk is already on your screen. But just before introducing her, I would like to kindly ask you to mute your microphone during the presentation. If you have any question during the talk, please use the chat box to send me your question. The webinar will be recorded and it will be shared through different media channels. If you would like to access to this webinar at another time, please note that it will be uploaded to our ENBIS Media Center and you can freely access to it. Now it is my great pleasure to briefly introduce our speaker. Galit Shmueli is Tsing Distinguished Professor at the Institute of Service Science at the College of Technology Management in National Tsing University in Taiwan. Her research focuses on statistical and data mining methods for contemporary data structures and especially behavioral big data. Most of you probably remember that she was invited plenary opening keynote speaker of our first online conference, ENBIS 20, with a talk about improving prediction of human behavior using behavior modification. But last but not least, and primary for this talk, she is the inaugural editor-in-chief of the Informed Journal of Data Science. So welcome, Galit, and thank you for being here. The floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Jean-Michel. This is a great opportunity to introduce the journal that I've been working hard to create and lead in the last, I guess it's already now 2 years. Before I get started, let me just mention, 1 second, that this journal is really the result of a lot of efforts by Inform's members from 3 main sections. One is the data mining and decision analysis group, and the other one is the QSR group. I'm guessing several of you are members in the QSR. And there's also something called the AI. I think it's not a section, but that also includes efforts like the new workshop on data science. So this has been going on for a few years, and there's been several people championing the need for a new journal for this field, and it's specifically a top journal. These communities have a lot of data science folks in them, and that of course ranges across a few different fields if you want. And although we do have journals, let's say in statistics, operations research, or operations management, or engineering, there is a need for a top journal that takes more of the data science-y stuff. And I'll explain soon what I mean by that. After stuff for several months and putting together an editorial board and putting together everything that you need started, we opened for submissions in fall 2020, around the time of the annual Inform meeting. And our first issue is going to be out there. It takes time until you actually put a journal like this together. It's been a pretty interesting experience for me. This is the first time an editor-in-chief on, although I was senior editor at some other pre-existing journals. So very interesting to be an entrepreneur, let's put it that way. Here's what I was planning to talk about in this webinar. And of course, if you have more questions later on, I'm glad to answer any of those, both in the webinar, or you can send me emails later on. But here's some of the things I want to share with you. So first of all, what is the vision of this journal? Who is the audience of this journal? I also want to talk about how this journal is different from other journals. So what is the focus? What is the specialty of the IJDS? Talk about the types of papers that we accept. I'll introduce you to the editorial board. I think to know who are the people right now on the editorial board. And then I'll talk a little bit about how and what you would want to submit if you wanted to submit your work for the journal. I also want to tell you a little bit about the review process, which might be a little different in some ways and similar in other ways to other journals that you know. Even for those of you who want to review or will review for us, I think it's useful to know how we do things here. I'll share how we have reviewer guidelines that are transparent and open. So we're also shepherding some new ways to help reviewers with streamlining and understanding what they need to review. And finally, I'll share with you a few of the accepted papers that will be coming out in the first one or two, volume 1 or volume 2. And I'll tell you about our community outreach. So that's the plan. And of course, you see it's kind of a lot of little things. I'll skip small details, but you can feel free to ask me about anything in the chat, and we can talk about it at the end. Okay, so who is the audience and what is the vision of this journal? The vision is a following. The IJDS is a peer-reviewed journal. It's aiming to publish top innovative and potentially impactful data science methodologies. Notice what I'm mentioning here is methodologies. And what we mean here is any field, statistics, machine learning, OR, engineering, econometrics, any computational, anything that would be called a data science methodology. We're open to all of that. And the point that makes us different is that we're talking about a contribution to decision-making, particularly in business management and industry. So there has to be some kind of a motivation that is a decision-making one. What we're trying to do is to provide a dedicated focal point for important data science research in socio-technical aspects of business, engineering, management, and industry. Now you'll notice that this sounds a little broad.
Sorry to interrupt you. There is some trouble with the sound. Perhaps you could switch off your camera.
Okay. Okay. I hope this is better.
Sorry for that.
No problem. Thank you for stopping me. Okay, so as I was mentioning, the second thing that's important here to note is our audience includes basically 2 or maybe 3 communities. One is the business school data scientists, the other, such as myself, for example. And then we have data scientists in engineering departments, mainly industrial engineering, sometimes mechanical engineering. And the third, which is also overlap with these 2 groups, is research groups in companies and in organizations. So realize that this is the audience that we're talking about. These are our authors, our readers, our editorial board. This is really the audience. We're trying to benefit these scientific communities, and we're trying to create an outlet that's aligned with how these data scientists write papers and read. And this is where the need for a new journal came, because while there are a bunch of journals that are either technical or in a certain domain, the focus, the style, and the language can be kind of different from the ones that we use as data scientists. So this is to make us feel more comfortable in how we communicate to each other. So how is the IJDS different from other journals? Our focus, 4 components in it. So every paper will basically have some combination of data, models, decisions, and implications. Now, what does this mean? Here's a scenario. It's not the only one, but it's a very common one of what a paper would look like. So you have some kind of a managerial or industrial decision-making motivation and some potential impact, or maybe even actual impact if you've implemented it. And then you're going to introduce some innovative data science methodology. Now, this can be a new model, a new algorithm, or it can be an existing model and algorithm, but a whole new approach to how you're using it or combining it or doing things. So that's what we call a methodology. So it has to have an innovative methodology. This would distinguish us, for example, from journals that are applied journals, where you can publish an application, where you use an existing method, but you contribute to an application, such as the Informed Journal of Applied Analytics or SS applications. We're not an applications journal. The third thing is data is going to be important. Real world, of course, is best, but we also accept simulated data. And this is, again, where we would diverge from an applied journal, because in an applied journal, for example, Annals of Applied Statistics, you would have to have a real data set. In our case, sometimes you won't have a real data set, but the scenario is real. So, for example, if you don't have access to Facebook data, but trying to show something that would work on Facebook, you could simulate something that looks like it and show why this would be relevant for the managerial implication that you're looking at. And lastly, we're very interested in hearing about practical implications, ethical implications. So not just suggesting here's an algorithm and here's the math for it, but we're talking about methods that we want to be applied in practice. So questions of people who would want to apply this, such as if there's serious computational issues or implementation issues, or there are going to be environmental issues if you need to run big things on big machines, I don't know, heat the whole atmosphere for 5 days. Maybe it's worth it and maybe it's not. A lot of societal issues going on now, especially if you're doing things in the sphere of digital platforms. So that's why we also have the implications. That will, again, it relates to different papers in different ways. Some papers will be heavier on different components, but they will all somehow touch on these different parts. At the IJDS, we accept 4 types of papers. The main and most common type is a research article. This is, again, as I described when you're introducing methodology. We also have a few other types. The second one is called a perspectives, and this would be a highly unusual original paper initiating a new area or offering a critical high-level contribution, typically the first kind. I'm sure you've seen things like this. For example, in statistical science, sometimes you'll see one of these kinds of papers. They will come with commentaries, so we will reach out and ask for commentaries, and sometimes a rejoinder from the authors. The third type is a review paper, but here what we're looking at a review of methodologies in an important data science area. So for example, if there's now a hot, interesting new area with lots of methods coming up, and readers want to know what is going on in this area so that they can figure out how they can use it, how they can contribute, develop new things, this is the kind of review that we're looking at. And finally, a fourth type that we haven't done yet, but we're planning to do is an interview. And once in a while, we'll interview a prominent data science researcher to try and share some of their insights with our audience. Okay, let's introduce our editorial team. I think it's important because this paper serves 2 different communities. So it's kind of an interesting editorial team and structure. We have senior editors, and you might recognize some of them. The reason we have several senior editors is because we cover several different areas. So you'll see people here more from the engineering side, such as Bianca Colosimo and Kwok Tsui. Then you have people more from machine learning, and then you have people more from computer science or OR. We're trying to cater to the different kinds of papers that are coming in, and we want to have experts in that field. That's why we have a bunch of different senior editors. Authors will select and point out to a couple of senior editors that they think are most appropriate for handling their paper. Underneath the senior editors, we have associate editors. We don't have dedicated E's for certain SEs, but rather our associate editors work as a pool, and the senior editors will select associate editor to assign your paper. Again, you can see we have about 30 plus associate editors, and they are more specialized, right, in more areas than the senior editors, from all over, from different places, both in the 2 communities that I mentioned, across industry and academia, geographically in different places, different research groups. We're actually pretty good on gender distribution. And again, geography, I think, is an important part to notice. So again, this is important because at submission time, we ask the authors to suggest the 2 senior editors who they think are most suitable to handle their paper. Of course, if that is not suitable, I will suggest someone else. I'll pick someone else, but it's very helpful if you carefully look at the senior editors and select the right person. You could optionally also suggest associate editors that you think are appropriate. We mentioned that our review process is single blind. So you will know the senior editors, but you will not know the associate editors and reviewers. However, the authors' names are on the papers, so everybody knows the names of the authors. And this, I can talk about this later on, but this is an important decision that we made that actually helps with many things.
Klopt.
I think someone has their mic on.
Komende maandag de 14e dan.
Okay. And finally, let me mention that we also have 3 more team members who are very important. We have a reproducibility team. Reproducibility editor is Enrique, and we also have a new team member, Nicholas Danks, and both of them will handle issues related to reproducibility. I will talk about this in a moment in more detail, because this is actually one of the highlights of this journal. And finally, our managing editor is Chris Asher. He works for Informs, and that's the person that you will hear from, get emails from as an author, as a reviewer, as anybody in the system. You'll hear from Chris. Okay, we have information that I showed you up to now is available on the website, on the IJDS website, which is on the Informs site. And you'll see there 2 things. You'll see the editorial statements, which includes a lot of the text that I showed you before about the communities, about data plus models plus implications. And then you'll also link the editorial board. Importantly, you'll see on the editorial board page, also see keywords of expertise of each one of our associate editors. So when you're thinking about whether your paper is a good match, that's one way to look to see if we're covering it. Or if you want to recommend associate editors, that's a good way to see who has experts in your area. So that's, I think, an important piece to notice. Next thing, suppose you wanted to submit a paper to the IJDS. Let me just point you to where the resources are. So on the same webpage as I mentioned, there's a submit button. But if you expected that to take you directly to the submission system, then you'll have a little surprise. Instead, that button will take you to the submission guidelines. And it's important because a bunch of things to take into account when you're submitting. What you will find here is, first of all, a link to the LaTeX template. Please use it. We try to make it as easy for you to get it. It's posted also on Overleaf for those of you who use Overleaf, so it's very easy to just copy it and use it right there. We limit the pages of a manuscript to 25 pages using the LaTeX template. Of course, on top of that, you can have any online appendixes that you want. You'll also see something called a proceedings policy, because many of our authors are also submitting papers to conferences, and some conferences actually have proceedings. We have a policy of whether you can take a paper that you submitted and was accepted at a conference and turn it into a journal paper. The policy explains what you need to do to expand it enough, and then what you need to submit along with your paper to show how it's different from the conference paper. You'll also find there the data and code disclosure form and policy. I'll talk about those in a minute. And you'll find, importantly, instructions for code submission. Not all papers have code, but I would say the grand majority of papers have code because you're somehow running your method. And finally, you will find a link to the submission portal from here where you can go and upload your files. So as I said, reproducibility is a really important aspect of our journal. As you probably have heard, there's a lot of issues of reproducibility going on in many fields that are using empirical methods. And that's why we actually have a whole reproducibility team. And from very early on, we already had a reproducibility editor who's helped. I've worked with them closely and designed a whole pipeline and process that's been working really nicely. We're actually spearheading some of the reproducibility approaches that are scalable and are author friendly, and are in a bunch of different task forces for other journals are also included. So why do we care about reproducibility? Reproducible code makes for impactful research. If you want people to use your method, your code needs to be usable. And we all know how hard it is to write code that someone else can use. In addition to the readers, we want the reviewers to be able to look at the code. Because if the main contribution is a computational algorithm, for example, then somebody should be able to run it and to take a look if they want to. Some reviewers are more technically, they're more interested in the computational part. They want to take a look at the code. We want them to be able to look at the code in a way that's easy and reasonable for them. We don't want them to start installing new libraries and new software and all that. So what happens is we ask you to submit the code in something called a Code Ocean capsule. I'll explain that in a moment. And in addition, you're going to submit a disclosure form, very super simple, like the one that you see here on the right side. And what this form asks you to do is to basically tell us whether the paper includes data and code. And if it does, tell us that you've actually put it into a Code Ocean capsule and give us the URL. I'll explain in a moment. Or if you're not giving us the code in a capsule, then we're going to ask you to explain why and to share a plan for how you will be sharing this data or code. So I'll tell you in a moment, I'll give you an example in a moment, but if your software is not supported by Code Ocean and you'd rather give us a GitHub, there are guidelines on our website of how to do it. Let me explain what a code capsule is. So it's a little bit like a time capsule. If you remember when you were a kid, maybe, we used to put things together in some place and hide it so that one day you can find them. Here's a little nice story from MIT where they were digging up to do renovations on some building and they found a time capsule that was placed there many, many years ago. But what a code capsule is something that preserves the code and the data within its environment. So, for example, preserve the software version, all the libraries, everything the way it was installed on your computer when you were running it. And it creates this file called a Docker file that can be run anytime in the future. It can run offline or it can run in a browser. And the way we're doing it to make things simple is we partner with this company called Code Ocean. And Code Ocean helps create capsules in a very, very simple way. Once you create the capsule, you can run it, anybody can run it anywhere and anytime, the cloud or locally, which means that a reviewer, for example, could just go to a browser and run your code without installing anything, which is really nice. It makes the code and the data transparent. They use an open source tech stack. You see here the icons of the different software that they have. They support R, they support MATLAB even, SCADA. They don't support everything. Python they do, of course, but they support a lot. And the other thing that's nice about Code Ocean is that at the end, when your paper is accepted, you can turn your capsule, you turn it into a publicly viewable capsule, and then it will create a DOI. So it will be a citable resource, which is extremely useful to you as an author and also to the journal. So how do you actually do this? I'll show you how simple it is by just showing you 3 screens. All the instructions, there's a guide with screenshots and everything on the website, but very, very briefly, you have the environment. So you go into the Code Ocean, you open an account, and then you tell it, okay, I have R and I have this version and I have these different libraries from GitHub or from CRAN, whatever it is. You select all these different packages that you're using. And then you upload your code and your data. There's an area for code on the left-hand side, and there's an area for data on the left-hand side. You just put it up there. And once you're done, you'll see on the right side, you'll see there's a blue button called Reproducible Run. And you can click that to see that it's running and it's reproducible. Finally, we'll ask you to add some metadata, add the authors, whatever other information that you need to, choose a license. Here, it's important at the bottom, you choose the journal partnering with them. You will find the Informs Journal on Data Science in that list. Select that and you click Submit. The minute you do that, an email will go to our reproducibility team so that they can actually match the capsule that you submitted with your paper. Okay, so that's about reproducibility and code. And let me explain how we designed the reviewing process. Our goal is to make it friendly to the authors and also to make it friendly to the reviewer. We've all been reviewing, doing this contribution for a long time. And I think it's important to make life easier and better for the reviewers as well. So for the authors, what we're doing is really focusing on rigorous, fair, and timely review. The goal is to have a single major revision, So the first screening of your paper is really important one. If the review team thinks that this is a publishable paper, but there's some things that are doable within a revision, you will likely get a major revision. And after that, maybe a minor revision, but you're probably already, you've passed the difficult part. That also means that if we don't think, the senior editor doesn't think that a major revision is sufficient, you might get a reject, or if we're not 100% sure, get a reject and resubmit saying, look, we're not sure you'll be able to address this in a revision, but this is interesting to us. If you think that you can address it, you're invited to submit a new submission, and we can guarantee that you'll get the same team so that things will be faster for you. Currently, our statistics are about 75 days on average to first decision. But again, we're relatively new. We've been running for 2 years. So statistics are, you need more data for statistics. We offer a very transparent reviewing criteria, and I'll show you in a minute what they are. So when you're submitting, you know exactly what are the questions that we're asking the reviewer. It's very easy for you to figure out whether this is going to be, all these pieces are in your paper. The other thing we did is we have a lot of AEs that are specialized to make sure that you get someone who really understands your paper, because we all know the frustration of an AE who really doesn't understand our paper. So that's something to notice. Also, if you feel that you were misunderstood, you can always communicate with the senior editor. So please feel free. Our senior editors are very open to communication. We've been doing this with authors, and we think this is an important component of a journal. The LaTeX template is pretty simple, and the accepted papers, this is also important for authors. When your paper is accepted, it will be on the website before even it is in its final, before it's published, of course, in an issue. And Informs is now also working on making all the accepted papers immediately available on their websites. The minute that will happen for all Informs journals, we will be included in that. That's happening like these days. It's in the pipe. In terms of reviewers, by offering an easily reproducible code, that should make your life easy if you are a person who likes to look at code or methods that people create. Of course, it's pretty cool to also see methods as they evolve. I know that some people enjoy even just seeing code that other people write to learn about how to write code nicely for new things. The 25-page limit is really important because it respects reviewers' times. And we're pretty strict about that. So really try not to go beyond 25 because the paper will come back. And as I mentioned, we're also spearheading this reviewer guidelines initiative where we're trying to help the reviewer. And we have 5 sets of guiding questions for reviewers. It's a very short, like kind of a checklist. Let me share with you what it looks like. So a reviewer will receive a Word file or a link to a Google Doc or whatever it is that they like, and it will have 5 text boxes. One will ask about motivation, one will ask about data, one will ask about methodology, then generalizability, replicability, and scientific impact. And the last one will ask about novelty, relevance, and rigor. Reviewers are asked to fill these text boxes. They can, of course, add further comments below these boxes if they want to the author, the associate editor, and of course they will recommend a decision to the AE. This form is available. You can see it on our website. It's very easy to see what's in there. I don't want to get into its details here. I just want to mention 2 small things about it. My slide here, I'm not going to get into the details, but you can see that for motivation, we kind of ask a few very straightforward questions. Is the motivating challenge or opportunity related to decision making? Because if the answer is no, then there's an issue of fit. The point that I want to focus on is actually in methodology. You see there's a small font here where we explain to the reviewer what we mean by methodological discovery. So we're saying papers should include either novel methodology or use of existing methodology in a completely new way or apply to a completely new type of problem. And we call this methodological discovery. For example, the use of machine learning algorithms, statistical model, or optimization approach for a completely new type of purpose. So we're helping the reviewer also understand what we define as methodology. The other point I want to make here is about number 5, Q5, novelty, relevance, and rigor. And we have a note here for the reviewer saying, rigor does not require mathematical proofs or theorems. Rigorous empirical and computational approaches are acceptable. And this is something that really makes us stand apart from other journals. For example, there are several INFORMS journals that require mathematical proofs of every new method that you propose. So we do accept computational approaches, and that's more in line with a machine learning data science approach. The AE also has guidance. There are 2 ways we guide the AEs. One is we give them 5 questions. Again, exactly in line with what the reviewers are reviewing. We're asking them, does the paper offer a potentially important methodological contribution? What are the paper's strengths and weaknesses with respect to novelty, relevance, and rigor? Does the paper fit in terms of the emphasis on motivation, data, methodology, etc.? Does the paper have any ethical issues? And we're now very sensitive to issues of human subjects, co-chairing. You know, this is already becoming a big issue in other places. The goal is not to shoot down authors. We're trying to help the authors. So the main question here is, can they be resolved? How can we help the authors resolve these issues? So for example, those who are using data from humans, sometimes you're required to go through an IRB or F boards, or if you're collecting data by scraping data, or you're doing things in some ways that they used to be considered okay, but now maybe they're considered not okay. These are issues that you want to think about, that the reviewers will be looking at, and we will try and help you to resolve them if it's possible. And the 5th question is, and this is very important, we ask our AEs to help the authors figure out how to make the paper publishable. So it's not just telling you this is not good and this is not good, I don't like this. No, the whole approach is the paper is interesting because of this. Here's something that you need to do to make it better. Here's what would add value. Here's why we think this will make it publishable. We have an annual meeting with the associate editors, and in that meeting, I dedicate a lot of time to help guide the AEs and what a report should look like, what is the kind of guidance that is helpful and unhelpful to authors. And we're putting a lot of efforts into this. So again, communications are open with us, with me and with your editors, and we're trying to guide our whole process as best as we can. We also learn, because it's a new journal, we learn on the go. So as we learn new things, we update, and we're very to hear feedback from our audience. Finally, let me share a few of the accepted papers so you get an idea of the kinds of things that are coming out soon. So in our first issue, we will have a perspectives paper called Causal Decision-Making and Causal Effect Estimation are not the same and why it matters. And we have commentaries from 3 sets of authors and rejoinder. And we will have here 2 research papers that have already been accepted. One's about a seasonal trend decomposition using regression, and another one is about constructing prediction intervals using likelihood ratio statistics. We also have a bunch of papers we have one on visualization and operations management research. This is a perspectives. And we also have a review paper on forecasting competitions. So these are the ones that are already accepted. There's several others that are in the pipeline. This is just to give you a flavor, but again, we're open to a very broad type of papers. As I mentioned, we're very interested in connecting with our community. This is why this webinar is a wonderful opportunity. We collaborate with several conferences, workshops, and competitions to put together fast-track submissions. So for example, INFORMS workshop on data science, the INFORMS DMDA workshop, the QSR Best Paper Competition, the QSR Data Challenge, and also the workshop on information technologies and systems. These are 5 that we've been collaborating with already, and we have some submissions from there. You'll find us on different editorial panels and conferences. We're glad to go. If not me, then one of the senior editors will be there. Always feel free to come and talk to us, email with us, or ask us what's going on. And finally, we have a social media group. We have 2 outreach ambassadors, again, from our community. Sriram from Notre Dame and Rima from Gitam. And they master our Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn. We have stuff on YouTube. We interview editors. We interview authors of accepted papers to talk about what was, interesting things about the process, interesting things about their papers. So there's a lot of interesting things going on there. And I welcome you to join whatever is your favorite social media, so that you can follow some of our latest things that are happening. And I think with that, I'll stop and just say that in summary, an IJDS paper is focused on novel methodology. It's motivated by decision-making. It's going to be of interest to data scientists in business schools or IE or mechanical engineering departments or research industry. We have a 25-page limit submission, so it's shorter than management papers, but longer than computer science conference papers. We offer a quality, fair, and fast review. And we're looking forward to your submissions. And of course, if you'd like to review for us, we very much would enjoy having you review. If you are interested, please contact one of the associate editors when you see their keywords, especially people that you know or even are just in your area, because those are the people who will select reviewers. So it's best to contact them so that you're on their radar. Stop here and open to questions. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Galit, for this very, very informative and dense and very impressive talk about this journal. I have some questions from the audience. The first one is, what is the best way to know about and get access to each of the journals mentioned and all data analytics and applied statistical literature? Applied data analysis, analysis of applied statistics, I have never heard of before.
How do you find them? Well, to be honest, just Google them. It's the first way to find them. Annals of Applied Statistics, it belongs to the IMS. Basically, if you go to the big organizations, right? You have the IMS, you have the American Statistician, you have Informs. All of these journals I mentioned belong to these organizations. So those are good ways to find them.
Thank you. Just to mention that you kindly accept to share not only your webinar, but also your slides. So this will be available for everybody in the next few weeks. A question from Shirley Coleman. Can we show the slide showing upcoming articles?
Sure. Okay. Let's find this. There we go. The accepted papers, right?
Yeah.
2 of them are already on the website, but because it's a new journal, there's some processes that just take time in the back end. So there's some of these are still not on the website. The ones on the left-hand side are still on the website. They will be there hopefully shortly. But the ones on the right side are already on the website.
Okay, thank you. Just a naive question from my side. Are the papers open and accessible to everyone?
Great question. So I was promised that for first 2 years, everything will be open.
Okay, so it's free for readers and free for authors.
It will be publicly available on the website for the first 2 years. What happens after that is going to be a different question. But I know they also allow the gold open access. So if authors wanted to pay to put it for free, that's an Informs all informed journals, they have that approach. But yes, in the first 2 years, everything will be open and available.
Okay. I have question from about Code Ocean. This part of your talk was really impressive because it's really an issue, reproducibility, sharing the link of Code Ocean. RVA data guy want to know if it can use this kind of a trick for all the coding, or is it slow, or there is some privacy issues? What is the...
Okay, so great. Let me explain how it works. When you put your data and code on Code Ocean, you can select either that it's completely private, only you can use it, or you can, for example, when you're working, if you want to submit it to the paper, to our journal, then it will make it, when you send it to us, it will only be available to us, so nobody else can see it. Only the reproducibility editor and the reviewers will be able to see that. Nobody else can see it. And the reviewers are instructed to treat this confidentially, just like they treat the paper itself. But once the paper gets accepted, we ask the reviewers, we ask the authors to go and make it public. And you go in there and you click make it public. And at that point, everybody can see that capsule and use it. Now, if your data are you're going to have to think about some way for us to evaluate the algorithm, because your data are not the most important asset for this journal. For this journal, the most important part is the algorithm or the method or the model or the approach or whatever it is. So even if you can't, in the capsule, you only want to put the simulated data, that's fine. You don't have to give the original data that has maybe a data disclosure issue. And that we've had that. Of course, if you can use real data, it's best, but you don't have to do that. The other thing I'll mention is that at acceptance, besides making it publicly visible, and the URL will be linked, it will show up on your paper. So your paper will say the code capsule for this paper is with a URL of your public capsule. In addition to that, we will ask you to send us the zip file. You can download it from Code Ocean so that we also place it in the supplementary materials. In case, I don't know what happens, we have it backed up there so that there's also always another version zipped on our website. I'll also mention lastly that after you've made it public, you can still update the code. So if you now have new stuff and you want to update the code, you can. And people who look at the capsule can see version history. They can see when you updated it and what are the new updates. So it's a very nice and versatile way to reproduce code. And in terms of running fast, I think you asked, it uses Amazon AWS in the back end. So it's pretty fast. If you're going to be running very heavy stuff and like you need a lot of resources, then you might exceed the free account. So that's the only thing. There's free amount until a certain limit, and then beyond that, you'll have to pay.
Thank you, Galit. I don't see more questions, so I take the I use my privilege to ask a question. You mentioned that there is some outreach ambassadors which help to disseminate the information about the papers. Is it something which is related to graphical abstract or a video abstract, which could be connected to the material per se?
So the outreach ambassadors, they don't create, okay, let me put it this way. We have a streamlined interview now that there are a bunch of questions that they will ask the authors. But if the authors themselves also have additional materials, let's say you also presented this paper and you have a video that you had on YouTube about it, the ambassadors would be very glad to say, you know, here this paper was accepted and here's a link to a presentation or to slides. So it can be two things. It could be the material that the authors have anyway that can be promoted by them. And the other is they will create, not for every paper because it's going to be too much, but for several papers, they will create video interviews with the accepted authors. So for sure. And they will also tweet and, you know, about the papers themselves. So authors can retweet or can share or do whatever they want to help promote their papers.
Okay, so you mean that it is material which is not reviewed. It is something separate, which is for the promotion of the paper. Okay.
Yes, and I think promoting papers today, you know, times have changed. Today, you really have to promote the papers. So we are actually dedicating our efforts. And again, this is our community. These are faculty, you know, research faculty who are doing this work. It's not a media company or anything like that. So it's part of this big effort to make good research visible that we're investing in.
Thank you very much. Very interesting. Any other question from the audience? Feel free to ask Galit some question. No more? No more. So I would like to thank you again, Galit, for this very excellent presentation and generous discussion. I just want to recall you that the call for papers are sent for our two main events this year in presence. The first one is the spring meeting about degradation and maintenance and modeling and analysis in Grenoble in France at the end of May. And of course, for the ENBIS annual conference in Trondheim at the end of June. So you can find the call in the home page of ENBIS. So please feel free to submit your paper. And again, we will put all the material about this webinar on the Media Center. So thank you again, Galit, and take care. Hello, bye.
Thank you very much. Thanks everybody for participating in your good questions. I hope to get your submissions.